The reason we are all here is Kathy Marks. I am very honored to introduce her. She is a retired safety professional, over 40 years of experience in health and safety, insurance, and risk management. Kathy has served in significant roles such as the president of Aspen Risk Management Group and the corporate environmental health and safety manager for a technology company. Her expertise spans a wide range of industries, and she is a sought-after instructor on workplace violence prevention, situational awareness, and active shooter response. Kathy has also served as a threat and risk assessment consultant for religious institutions and schools using the principles of crime prevention through environmental design. Her commitment to safety began with her service in the United States Coast Guard Reserves, specializing in the safe handling of military munitions and hazardous materials. That's quite an extensive background. Her dedication to the field has earned her recognition as the Insurance Woman of the Year. Congratulations. International Risk Manager of the Year, another congratulations, and Safety Professional of the Year by various organizations. In retirement, Kathy continues to contribute to the safety community, serving as the co-president and security committee advisor for Temple Emmanuel. Her career is a testament to her dedication to safety, her commitment to education, and her passion for protecting others. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Marks. Kathy, thank you for being here. I turn it over to you.
All right. So first off, Warren, thank you so much for that introduction, and I appreciate it very much. This is one of my favorite presentations to give because I was a safety department of one when I was a manager of a technology company, but I have been in insurance for 45 years before I retired, over 35, specifically in safety. And as I shared in the breakout room, I think as a safety consultant, I learned as much from a lot of my clients as hopefully they learned from me. And I want to share the things that worked, share the things that didn't. And I also want to mention that for those of you that are a safety department of one right now or very limited, I hope to give you some tools for your toolbox to kind of be able to be a little bit more effective, maybe one or two ideas. For those of you that might be on the call that maybe are in between jobs, some of the things that we talk about may be ideas and information that you can learn that when you're doing a job interview will separate you from the typical safety person that's out there. Many times we as safety people, we talk about regulations and we use these acronyms that nobody else knows about except us. And we forget to talk the business side of safety. And that's really one of the things that is very, very important for us to be truly effective. It has to be more than just rules and regulations and all of that, although that is a huge part of what we do. So I want to share that with you and some personal anecdotes that work for me as well. So here we go. What are we going to discuss? We need to talk about risk management language. We need to talk about that language of the chiefs, right? Of all the people in the C-suite that we have to deal with. If we don't talk the CFO's language, they're not going to hear us. How do we identify our allies in our organization, the production manager, the risk manager, the public works manager, whatever it is, to keep them on our side when we do have to make those tough decisions, maybe to shut down an operation temporarily, or to share and coach them and mentor them as to what the consequences will be if we don't take a breath and slow down. Time management strategies, again, you know, we're constantly that kind of chaotic movement that we have, because we have to be really human-centric instead of just paperwork-centric. Identifying our opportunities to drive safety engagement, delegating those responsibilities, that's not very easy for me. I have to really work at it. Communicate that value of safety, and then utilizing outside resources. And it sounds like a lot of you are tapping into those. And again, as we talked about in our breakout room, a lot of these outside resources are free or minimum cost, and certainly networking, as Warren was saying, is absolutely critical. So let's talk about kind of that language of that C-suite, all the chiefs, the CFO, the CIO, the COO. How do they talk? But let's talk about who we are first. And for those of you, 55% of you have been in safety 10 years or more. We know where we come from. And this is the pride. I am so proud to have dedicated my life to the safety profession. Many of you know and are aware that we really started as a safety profession after the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, March 25th of 1911. And if you have not read a book, there are two books that I recommend that all safety professionals read. And one is The Triangle, called About the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, what talks about, and many of you know, this was a sweatshop, the shirtwaist factory. Those are the blouses women used at the turn of the century. These employees were locked into the building because the owners thought that they were stealing thread and needles. And so it was a Saturday, so a lot of employees were off, but there were still 146 employees that died. Many of them jumped from the 9th floor of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. From this fire, and I don't have time to go into all of the details, it is horrific, came in October of 1911. We weren't called the American Society of Safety Professionals then. We were called the United Association of Casualty Inspectors. So in 1911, we were the Casualty Inspectors. In 1914, we went to American Society of Safety, or 1914, yeah. American Society of Safety Professionals. We're engineers, and now we are the professionals. We went from inspectors to engineers to professionals. From the Shirtwaist Fire came the Life Safety Code. National Fire Protection Association was around, but they started then because of the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. All of these life safety codes, the exits and the lighted exits and moving exit doors in the motion of travel. If you have not, as a safety professional, ever sat through a life safety code training, you're gonna want to die by the time that this class is over. It's not the most fascinating while you're in it, but it is information that is essential for us to be able to communicate why we can't have blocked exits, why we have to have so many exits based on the occupancy rate. So all of that came from the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, which of course we are very, very proud to have come from. But interestingly enough, and I love this quote, it was what, 59 years until the OSHA Act came in 1970, still fairly new in the big scheme of things. And I love this quote from the Secretary of Labor in 1968, right before the OSHA Act, President Nixon: people can't see the blood on the food that they eat, on the things that they buy, and on the services they get. And I'm telling you, having municipalities here, I've worked with many municipalities, almost every city in San Diego. You know, when there's a storm, it's like, oh, my power's out. Why is it? It's been out for 30 minutes. Why isn't it fixed? We know as the safety professionals at municipalities what it takes for these men and these women to slosh out there in the rain and the storms and fix this power. We still have sweatshops. We still have people on, Amazon Prime Day that want their boxes that day. I never do that. I always think, oh my gosh, I don't need it. And I'll do it on Amazon Prime Day on Thursday. I don't need it that fast because I know what it takes to go ahead and get people to get that to me. One book that secondly, from the Triangle Fire, that I recommend if you've not read is called The Jungle by Upton Sinclair. It came out in 1905. And he wrote about the slaughterhouses in Chicago, and it's got a love story involved, but primarily he wanted to bring to people's attention the horrible working conditions of the slaughterhouses. What was fascinating is that people were not outraged about people falling into the pits, slipping and falling in the blood, getting their arms cut off with all of the knives. What they were appalled by is the food safety. What do you mean someone's hand was ground up in my hamburger? The outrage was not what employees were going through. The outrage was food safety. And again, 65 years after 1905, when it was published, we finally have the OSHA Act, which of course is what we live and breathe by, to making sure that we have at least that as a guide. So at the end of the day, what is the purpose of our profession? Well, it really falls into one of these three categories. Our primary purpose in life is to save lives, to prevent injuries and illnesses, and to protect our organizations from financial harm. That's it. It's really that simple. So when we look at safety management 101, when we look at safety, we are not this little island upon ourselves. We have to look at safety and manage it the way any other critical business function is managed, from sales to production, marketing, whatever it is, because we understand the cost factor. But remember, our decisions place a major bearing on the perception of our company to the public. Just think of Bumblebee Foods. For those of you that are in Northern California, we know that when this happened, I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about what happened at Bumblebee when an employee was actually cooked in what's called the retort. It's how they pasteurize the tuna. And it was settled a $6 million fine for Bumblebee tuna. It was all over the newspaper. And of course, you get people, oh, employees cooked with the tuna, don't eat the tuna. It's, you know, got people parts in it. Of course, that never happened. But the bearing of Bumblebee and their reputation to the public was huge. And of course, with these workers, the safety manager and the operation manager were actually personally fined and criminalized because of their decisions made. So we don't have that protection of the corporate veil. But for this particular slide, just know that the decisions that happen, the last thing we want is the name of our organization on the front page of the local paper. So here's how I've always felt. And when I've taught leadership classes, I always say that as a safety professional, every decision we make has a moral, legal, and financial impact. Every decision we make. First, we have to do our moral compass. And when I first started in safety, it was like, well, I just have to point out to somebody that someone's going to get hurt and they'll do everything I say. Well, those rose-colored glasses fell off pretty good. But I can tell you that late 90s, I was working for J&H, which is an insurance broker at the time, in San Francisco, when I was assigned to a client who made rubber moldings for flooring. And they had one of these big, huge mixers. And one of their employees fell in the mixer and actually was ground up. It was a horrific injury. And I was assigned afterwards by the broker to meet with this client. And my contact was the CFO. And over about 6 to 8 months, I went through moral implications of what they need to do. It's the right thing to do, the training, the coaching, the mentoring, improving their equipment, which was very, very old at the time. I went through the legal. They had already been fined by OSHA. They had OSHA inspections. And then finally, I had charts and graphs to show them what the long-term implications were if they don't control their safety program. And do you know that at that last meeting, the CFO said, Kathy, you're like a cuff biter. You're like a little terrier that gets on the bottom of your pants and won't let go. And I said to him, I said, you know what? I'm out of my bag of tricks. You've already killed somebody. I have tried the moral high ground. I have tried the legal implications, and I have shown you the financial implications if you don't turn the ship around, and you're not getting it. And I really don't know if there's anything else that I can do. But I stuck with that. They ended up kind of going out of business a few years later. And I'm not too surprised about that, but you know what? Sometimes you can only do so much, but if we concentrate on that moral, legal, financial, I would say 99.9% of the managers get it. Because here's the thing, and that was why I asked some of these questions at the beginning. Moral impact, ethics-based safety and health programs. Dr. Jan Wachter, Indiana State University, asked, do you have the moral courage to embrace ethical, not just regulatory standards in our workplace? Our moral courage is the courage to take action for moral reasons, despite the risk of adverse consequences. as safety professionals, and I did as a corporate safety director in San Jose, we used class 4 laser systems as part of the photolithography equipment that we built. These were lasers that could go through metal. We used toxic gases as the lasing medium. And it just so happens, and we're going to talk about kind of sitting in on various meetings, which I really didn't think I had anything to do with, but I overheard that they were going to buy a new class 4 laser for this new kind of product that they wanted to develop. And my ears kind of pricked up a little bit, and I went, wait, where are you going to put this laser? And it ended up that this laser that was coming in a couple days was going to be put in a room that would not be able to contain it. And so I had to stop it, and I had to say, look, you can't use this laser until we get the proper walls in place and the laser mediums in place and the bells and the whistles to make sure that it's a safe place to use it. And so sometimes we have to take that moral courage depending and forget the fact that it might affect our position, because it's all about saving lives. I had to do that in the Coast Guard too. I had to shut down the operations of one of our loading of the ships. Our job was to load and offload military munitions on civilian ships up in Port Chicago and Concord at the Concord Naval Weapons Station. And I had some young guy who was using the forklift as kind of a race car, and his supervisor would not get him out of the hold, and I ended up closing it down until he got out. So that was quite a big thing, but at the end of the day, I was responsible for every single person on that ship. So let's talk about ethical safety leadership. And I just want to throw something in here for a second. I know I've been doing this for a long time, and I get on LinkedIn and I love all the stuff that's coming out there, but I think we sometimes make safety so complicated. You know, maybe there are PhDs and doctors on the call with safety and all this stuff, but you know what? We get into the psychosocial, what drives people to do things that are unsafe. Well, look, as safety leaders, it's 5 bullet points. What's our leadership guide that we can communicate to senior management that they can understand? Our job is to assess hazards, understand what can hurt our employees in the workplace and implement those controls, communicate those hazards and educate our employees so they can protect themselves. And I heard someone say that on the call. You're right. Our employees have to know how to protect themselves, raise their hand to know when they need to stop that operation, the stop work programs. If somebody gets hurt, manage that injury case fairly, speak to them with respect, because you know what? I truly believe that 96% of employees that get hurt on the job want to go back to work and put food on the table for their families. Unfortunately, it's that small percentage that gives all the other employees a bad name that really understand the system. But most employees want to come back to work, and that is our job. Know what can hurt them, control what can hurt them, talk to them about how to protect themselves. If they get hurt, manage it fairly, talk to them with respect, and get them back to work as quickly as possible. That's our leadership, ethical safety leadership guiding principles. Because safety is a value. Safety is not a priority. If any of you have a sign that says safety is our #1 priority, what happens to priorities? All those other people that signed up for this meeting today and didn't come, it shifted, their priorities shifted. But if safety is a value with no compromise, your priorities are not going to override the decisions that you need to make, because we truly, simply, a safety culture is led by us, committed to the principle of safety for its own sake. It's not just about compliance. That's the minimum of what we should do in the workplace. It's really helping our workplace that nobody gets hurt today. That's our goal, not reducing back injuries by 10%. Our goal is nobody gets hurt. That's where we start every single day. So let's look at, what does a safety leader look like? Because as we develop who we are to communicate to the C-suite, We have to understand, what does a safety leader look like? What are the responsibilities, quality traits? And maybe this is something that you can bring back to your safety committee or your managers when you have your manager meeting as a safety leader. Well, UC Berkeley a few years ago did a survey with about 54,000 employees, and I found this to be extremely interesting, that the #1 leadership characteristic was integrity. It wasn't visionary, it wasn't decision-making, it wasn't being an expert in the field, it was integrity. And especially for those of us whose employees are doing things where their absolute lives depend on who we are, having integrity, having them trust us is more important to them than us being courageous. They don't want us to be courageous with their life. They want to know that we're going to tell them the truth, the good, the bad, the ugly. I need you to understand that this is why it's important, because these are the consequences if we don't do it the right way. I really, really think that this was eye-opening to me when I first saw it. So I thought, what does integrity look like? Well, I thought about the employees that worked for me, not just on the ships, but at my technology company, because again, we worked with toxic gases and high-powered lasers. They trusted me to know that I would keep their safety in mind at all times. And every decision I made, I was committed to them and their families. I had humility that they knew I was asking them to perform tasks that were hazardous, right? I was there with them. What if I never went into the laser room? What if I never went into the room that had the toxic gases? Oh no, it's safe to go in. If they did not see me in there with them, and every single time I saw my employees walking into a situation where I told them it was safe, I educated them that it was safe, that I let them know the controls that were in place, and they trusted me, I was humbled. And I knew that the minute I was no longer humbled, I needed to end my stay there. What does integrity look like? It's honesty and having moral principles, that I'll always be honest. I will always tell them the truth. I will always have their back, and I'll be there by their side to truly understand the risks. And that's why one of the questions was, do you have time? And I know in some areas it's easier than others, whether or not it's a warehouse, whether or not you're out in the field. Be there, build it, be next to them. As I mentioned in our breakout group, my predecessor never went into the fab, never gowned up. And the first time I went into the fab, the few days after I got hired, it was like, oh my gosh, what is Kathy doing here? Is somebody in trouble? It was like, no, if I'm not working alongside you, how can I understand what the risks are that you face, that I can put in the controls and the training to help you? We have to be out there. It's not always easy, but the better you're out there, the better you're going to understand what the risks are. So let's talk about the legal impact. We know that there's OSHA fines, the lack of goodwill that we can never get back if our employers are on the front page of the newspaper. But I want to share with you, and this happened a while ago, gosh, I can't believe it's almost 10 years, at Bumblebee Tuna. So the plant operations manager and the former safety manager each had been charged with 3 counts of violating the OSHA Act that caused the death. Now, this was civil, this was personal, this is not under the veil of the corporate insurance program. Flores, who was the safety manager, was sentenced to 3 years of probation and a personal penalty of almost $20,000 after pleading guilty to a single felony count of violating workplace safety rules that caused the death. What do you think? If you look at this retort, lockout, tag out, and certainly confined space. Rodriguez, who was the plant operations manager, guilty of misdemeanor 18 months of community service, 320 hours of community service, and $11,000 of fines. They actually faced up to 3 years in prison. This was 100% preventable. And one of the reasons that Bumblebee got hit with a $6 million fine, for those of you that remember how many companies can sustain $6 million, is that this is an example of once the tuna is in the cans, at the bottom picture, you can see a chain that comes out of what's called the retort, and the carts are pushed into the retort, and the chain is pulled like a pulley system, and the carts go towards the back. The door is closed, and it's a pressure cooker, if you will. Well, Mr. Melendez was inside the back of the retort fixing the chain. And so when the employees saw the chain wasn't hanging there, they didn't think anything of it because, keywords, they were always broken, always broken. So it didn't mean anything to them that the chain was missing. He literally was cooked to death. It was a horrendous, horrendous death. And what OSHA found was that in interviewing employees, they didn't have a lockout tagout program implemented. They didn't have a confined space program. Their equipment was always broken. And part of the agreement was they had to replace a lot of these retorts. So when we go to our managers, when we go to the powers that make these decisions, and we say we can't afford not to replace our equipment, we can't afford not to put the locks and the tags and the machine guards on, we can't afford not to train our employees on how to protect themselves and implement this. Bumblebee is a great example of a real life scenario where not only were they fined, but the operations manager, the safety manager were personally fined for their lack of action. So we talked about the moral, legal, and now let's talk about the financial. Now, for those of you that have been around safety for a while, you know what? This is something that may be a little bit of review for you, but for those of you in kind of the new parts, and this is something that we can help talk the language of the managers. So I just want to share with you kind of coming up with the truer cost of incidents, profit margin, and a little bit about how insurance works. So we talk about that cost of incidents, right? We've got the direct cost and the indirect cost. The direct cost is only about 10% of that iceberg, if you will, that we see. The tangibles, the bill from the doctor, right? The employee wasn't there, and maybe it's the lack of production, things that we can actually quantify. The indirect costs are kind of the ishy costs, your time doing the accident investigation, the breakup of a crew, the hiring of somebody to step in for that employee. So to come up with a truer cost of an accident, you know, you can kind of take that base cost and just multiply it by 3 or 4, and you can get the truer cost. Or Liberty Mutual came up with what we call the sliding ratio. And the sliding ratio is one way to say, all right, let's figure out the long-term implication of what an injury can cost. And this is kind of that tool in your tool belt. We take the direct cost, times it by a cost multiplier, again, just kind of an ish number, gives you an indirect cost. You take the direct plus the indirect gives you the truer cost. All right, let's do an example. Let's say you have an employee that got a laceration on their hand. You see the $1,500 bill from urgent care, $1,500, right? It's a workers' comp claim, doesn't seem too bad. But let's kind of get that truer cost and hold that thought by what I mean by the truer cost. For those of you, now municipalities don't usually have experience mods. You might be able to get one from your insurance pool, but your private sector will. Take the direct cost of $1,500, times it by 4.5, which makes it $6,750. 1,500 plus 6,750 is $8,250, $8,250. It's a little bit truer than that 1,500. Well, why is that? Well, let's kind of talk about the profit margin as we lead into the experience mod. Let's take that truer cost of that injury and divide it by profit margin. You can do it by a lot of different things, replace that word of profit margin, revenue by taxes, whatever that is. If you have a 3% profit margin, let's say your insurance costs alone increased by $8,250. At a 3% profit margin, you would have to bring in $275,000 just to break even with an increase in insurance premiums of $8,250. At a 1% profit margin, that's $825,000 just to break even for that increase in insurance costs. Now, as we were talking about earlier, you know that forklift, all of a sudden it's a lot less than $275,000, right? We have a back injury that's $150,000 at a 3% profit margin. How much money do we have to bring in? These are the dollars that we as safety professionals have to be able, that business side, to talk to the decision makers so that they understand that we understand the business side of safety, not just the regulatory side. When we look at the truer cost, remember, for workers' compensation, our XMOD, our experience modification rate, it's based on payroll, how much payroll is in each rate. So each employee has a classification. So let's just say you're a roofing company, your office employees are typically 64 cents or so per every $100 of payroll. Your roofers are maybe $8 for every $100 of payroll. So that is combined, and your experience modification rate really forecasts your company's future loss history based on similar companies. Your experience information is submitted every year to the Workers' Comp Rating Bureau. And every state has something that is similar to the Workers' Comp Rating Bureau, which is kind of a California West Coast thing, but every state has one. It's a 3-year loss history. Remember that tail we talked about? It's not really $1,500, it's really $8,250. Well, let's say your insurance renews in 2023. Your experience, all that claims information, that loss history is taken into consideration from 2020, 2021, and 2022. So that tail on that $1,500 is kind of why we kind of look at the truer cost is really that $8,250. So let's say your insurance XMOD goes up in 2023 because in 2020 you had a really bad loss year and you weren't hired until 2021. It's like, hey, I wasn't here. You guys should have hired me a year before. So these are things, again, to understand how the experience modification rate is calculated, at least the years of loss data that's used. Why is an EMR important? To understand what it is. If you're a contractor, a lot of times employers or general contractors will want to know what your EMR is, because they feel that if you have a high EMR, obviously they don't want you on their job site. They'll lower your workers' compensation because it takes that base rate and it multiplies it by your experience mod. You can do a better bid. But is it really an accurate indication of your safety performance? Let's talk about this, because these are the things that you're going to have conversations with the company risk manager or the CFO. Here's the problem. It varies by state. All states are no-fault systems, but the calculation varies by state. It's a trailing indicator. Remember, what happened in 2020 is not indicative of what you're doing in 2023. It is based on claims reserving. So let's say I get injured because of my age and the type of injury. The claims department of the carrier reserves $100,000. That's what the EMR is based on, is what's set aside to pay for my future claim. But really, because I'm healthy, it's only going to cost $15,000 to fix me. I'm back at work, but that reserve is still at $150,000. My EMR is going to be based on that $150,000. So by participating in claims reviews as a safety manager, you know when your employees are back to work, you understand how the EMR works. You want to make sure that that reserved claim is indicative to how that employee is responding to the medical treatment. Look, we have no control over the rise of medical insurance. Cost to fix an employee in 2023 is drastically different than 2020 or even 2021. Late reported claims, maybe they're in 1 year versus another. Look, negligent acts into the workers' comp system. Remember, it's a no-fault system. We have an employee, we've all wanted to glue safety glasses on employees' face. I know we fantasize about some of the things we would love to do. We can't do it. We just can't. But they're still covered under workers' compensation. Remember, we have employees that could be in a company vehicle, right? They're stopped at a stoplight. We have a car that just plows into the back of them. It's a workers' comp claim, but that is not reflective of your safety program. Employees traveling on business or at a customer site, you have no control over how their safety programs are. Lack of subrogation, we have employee falling off a defective ladder or it breaks, subrogating those activities to reimburse the workers' comp system. And then our favorite, that cumulative trauma, soft tissue injuries that can go on and on and on, and sometimes are worse than they actually are. So there are problems with that, but we have to understand how that works. How do we manage the EMR? How do we engage that business side of safety? Well, we talked about the claims expert. Your broker usually has a claims person who works with the workers' comp insurance carrier and helps manage those claims. You can get your mod worksheet every year so that you understand what that projection is. Participate in regular claims reviews, and I'm giving you the link for California. For those of you that are not in the state, you can just do XMOD calculation for your state, because they're different dates of when those claims reviews are done in order to reduce that reserve. It's called unit stat filings, when your insurance carrier takes those dollars that they've reserved and they send it off to the workers' comp rating bureau to set your XMOD for that upcoming year. Continue your safety efforts. What are the benefits of speaking this language? You are going to gain credibility as a management leader and not just that safety nerd, right? We wear hard hats, we wear vests, we, have jeans because we're, schlepping chemicals around. We need to make sure that we are looked at a true leader. And when I say just, I'm very proud to be just a safety professional, but also we have to talk again, that credibility. If you understand the rate of investment, rate of return, the profit margin, you can make more financially sound safety recommendations. Your communications to the C-suite are more clear and credible because you're talking their language, makes you a better team player, and it gives you a chance to sit at that table. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But this kind of financial side, this risk management side, understanding how insurance works, helps us gain that credibility. So now that we know this, and it's interesting how some safety professionals think, you know what, I don't have time to understand company finances or risk management or HR or any of that stuff. I just need to concentrate on my world as a safety professional. But don't forget, if we do not become involved, we become irrelevant. If we do not become involved and understand the profitability of our enterprise, the goals, the mission of our organization, we will become irrelevant and we won't have a seat at the table when decisions are being made. So hopefully this was helpful. So let's talk about allies as we kind of wrap up the last part of this section. Identify who is who in our organization. If you haven't gotten an organizational chart, now some companies don't like them, it's really helpful as the safety manager. Who reports to who? Who's the head of production? Who's the head of public works, right? And meet with the president and the CEO, the CFO, meet with the head people. They're going to give you 5 minutes. They're all, that dominant personality. If they give you 5 minutes, only take 5 minutes. Meet with the director of human resources, meet with the risk manager, meet with engineering, meet with your insurance broker, find out who they are, sit down, let them know you, because remember, when they market your insurance program, they are selling not only your company, but they are selling you when it comes to workers' comp. They want to have confidence that the safety leader, the safety manager, is going to be able to control losses, When they sell your organization to that new carrier, meet with the facilities manager. I had the great relationship with the facilities manager. Certainly we had shutdowns every year to make sure that we had to, upgrade our systems. He was really my right-hand person as the safety director for our organization. But really identify with them, meet with them, hear where they're coming from, understand what their perception of safety is. Tell your safety story. The first week I was at the technology company, I met with all the key players and I said, I am not here to set up hurdles. I am here to take hurdles down. I need to understand what's important to you so I can support you. Tell them what safety means to you. Morally, that's the first decision I make, the moral, legal, the financial. Put your business hat on and meet with the CFO and understand what the profit margin is, what our XMOD is. Talk in business language, not just our regulations. They don't care what OSHA says. They don't care about the acronyms. What they want to understand is that you know what the company mission, goals, long-term strategic plan is. Look, if it was up to me, we wouldn't have any lasers and toxic gases, but unfortunately that wasn't the product that we made, right? So I had to get on board. I had to work with them to make sure that if we were going to have that in our workplace, of course, it had to be safe. And they knew where I was coming from. If I slowed down or I asked questions, it was not because I wanted to put up a hurdle, but it was because I wanted to make sure it was safe and I had the long-term strategic plan in mind. So go spend a few days building it, painting it, drawing it, walking it, touching it, being there, be there and be seen being there. We talked about some of the municipalities and how hard it is to get out there. It isn't easy. It isn't easy just even in a static work environment. But you know what I had to do, because it wasn't easy getting in that gown, I put it on my calendar. I would mark my calendar twice a month, 3 times a month. I would put it in my calendar. We also had a swing shift and it was really easy for me to go home at 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, but at least twice a month, I put in my calendar that I would be there for the swing shift. It's not easy. When I was on the insurance company side and I had loss control consultants, not only in Northern California, but in Fresno and Southern California, I had to put on my calendar that I would get out and meet with them. Again, if you have to put it on your calendar, just go ahead and do it. Get to know your employees. One thing I want to share with you is something that I learned from a workshop, and I really love this concept. And I actually had a couple garbage recycling operations that one specifically really adopted this. And the motivational speaker, he said, I want everybody in this room, and there was maybe 600 of us, to write down the 4 people in your life that would be affected if you got hurt on the job. The 4 people. Y'all wrote it down: mom, dad, husband, kids, whatever it was, my neighbor who realized I need to mow their lawn, whatever. And he said, what would your safety department or safety culture look like that instead of me saying, hey, Bob, put your safety glasses on. Oh my gosh, how many times do I have to tell you? What if instead I said, hey, Bob, and I just held up 4 fingers? Because you know what, Bob? It's not about you and it's not about me. It's about those 4 people that would be affected if you went blind. Your daughter who's about ready to get married, right? That grandchild who's about ready to be born. What would your safety culture look like where if you saw other employees, instead of the confrontation of, hey, Bill, you got to lift right, they just hold up 4 fingers and you see that culture building within each other, that they're looking out for each other's 4. And that's what my garbage recycling company did. They had banners, everywhere saying, look out for your 4. It's about your 4. Who are your 4? And it changes the culture. The other thing we talked about in our breakout room was, and I want to share this before I forget, is I had a vegetable packing company, and boy, the safety manager had this down pat, and they were required to wear hard hats. So the first color of the hard hat were red hats, right? Her Red Hat team were her leaders, their managers and supervisors, so that wherever you were in this big, huge warehouse with conveyor belts and, it's cold and it's wet, were the red hats. Anyone can go to anyone with a red hat and ask a question. Experienced employees had bright lime green hard hats on. They were experienced. Certainly you could go to them, but they needed less oversight. New employees had white hard hats. Not to call them out, not to make them feel bad, but so that people knew they were new, so that they might keep an extra lookout for them to make sure that they don't get hurt and they were doing it right. And when an employee after 30 or 60 days graduated from a white hat to a lime green hat, it was a big deal. Everyone was in a big circle and they were presented with this lime green hard hat because they earned it, and they celebrated safety. And that was part of, you are part of our team. We are all looking out for each other. So again, there's so many fun things we can do with safety to draw in everyone. It's not just our responsibility. Develop into a valued and well-respected contributor to the company. Attend as many strategic department meetings as possible. Sales, budget, strategic planning, insurance renewals, claims reviews, right? You may not think that that sales meeting means anything to you as a safety manager, but you know what? That sales meeting is where I heard that they were going to buy a class 4 laser that was different than all the other laser systems we had, and we did not have a space in our facility to contain that laser. It was only because I sat in that meeting and 90% of it meant nothing to me, then all of a sudden something did. Sit in insurance renewals. You are a contributor because you can talk about the workers' comp injuries. Claims reviews, sit in on the claims reviews so you understand how they're being reserved when unit stat filings are happening. Invite senior leaders to your safety committees as a guest speaker. Nurture that relationship. I remember when I had the vice president of production come to our safety committee meeting, and his words to me were, "Oh my gosh, you guys aren't just wasting time, you're actually getting things done." Because a lot of senior managers think, oh, these safety committee meetings, people are just coming there having lunch and, just complaining about stuff. When they became guest speakers and saw our agenda, saw what we were trying to accomplish, it gave us their support to continue on with our safety committee. So nurture those relationships. Let them know that their opinion matters to you. So time management strategies. It's a lot easier said than done. Remember, again, we want to be human-centric, not just paperwork-centric, right? Delegating responsibilities, increasing ownership among supervisors and employees. How do we do that? Again, time management strategies. Pick a day or two a week that you will be out there on the floor, out in the field, away from your desk. Set a date each month. We talked about that, to visit field offices or stay late. Try to meet for lunch every quarter with a senior manager or somebody to talk about your safety goals. Regulatory changes. One thing that I found is that in our chemical process, one of the chemicals that we were using was going to be discontinued. And thank goodness I was tied into that, and I was able to let our production manager know almost a year in advance that we had to change our process. So maybe by December of 2023, get these meetings on your calendar, try and set them up with a senior manager, short, sweet, even if you just bring your lunch and sit somewhere, just make sure that you touch base. Meet annually, and I say for 5 minutes with the president owner, the risk manager of the municipality. You're only going to get 5 minutes, get that elevator speech going. You're developing that relationship. Remember, our OSHA logs, if you are required to keep an OSHA log, it has to be signed by a senior manager of the organization every year, right? So it's not you, it's more than likely the CEO, CFO, and every year I'd go to our CFO and he'd say, Kathy, am I going to go to jail if I sign this? I say, no, you're not going to go to jail. But if you do, Bruce, I'll go ahead and meet with you for sure. I'll visit you. And he goes, okay, good. And he would sign it. So develop that relationship. Safety committees, right? How do we drive engagement? active and proactive vehicle for employee involvement. It is a form of enterprise risk management, which is a different way of getting all different departments together. But if you have representatives from all different parts of your organization, there's collective problem solving. It is a synergistic relationship where some departments may not even know that they have the same issue. Coordination of regulatory implementation, and certainly gives you a chance to delegate, facility walkthroughs, observations, job safety analysis, development, and succession planning. And I know delegation is not easy. I can tell you that I think it was around, 8, 9 o'clock one night. I was working late in the office and I got a call from someone. And I remember saying out loud to myself, to actually no one but me, doesn't anybody make a decision around here without calling me first? And I realized as soon as I said it, this is the honest truth, I realized I created that myself. I wasn't delegating. I thought as a safety manager, I had to do everything. And I forgot that I had to put some of that responsibility on the managers, supervisors, and the employees. That's part of that development, that kind of what we were just talking about, that safety initiative to secure needed resources. Develop your company's safety university. Here's, a Whole Food Safety University. Maybe you have one. ABC Safety University. Create a curriculum. Maybe this is your thing for 2024. Based on job, task, and regulatory compliance, right? So you need to do lockout, tagout, confined space, walking and working surfaces, whatever it is. Set a curriculum. January, you're going to do this, February, this. And remember, we talked about using your loss control consultant from your carrier, your insurance pool, your broker. The Safety Center has an amazing array of safety people. Include office personnel. Our production employees used to tease me, oh, it's the non-productive employee training today. No, it's the non-production, right? Because they worked around locations with laser signs and toxic gas alarms. I had to train them not just on ergonomics, but what all that stuff meant. Use OSHA guidelines for when you initially have to do the training, how often refresher training, and do a leadership development. Don't keep all the safety information to yourself. The more your managers and supervisors and senior leaders understand why you say and do the things you do, they're more apt to support you. It's not, I'm just not saying we have to do, HAZCOM training every other year because I don't have anything else to do. It's a requirement. I'm not saying we have to do fit testing just because it's something I like to play around with the smoke. It's because they are not allowed to wear those respirators until they are fit tested. So help them understand why you do and say the things you do. Use your safety committee to identify topics and identify internal subject matters. It doesn't have to be you. I remember when I went to laser safety officer school and I was thinking, oh my gosh, all this math and calculating, optical density and all of these laser glasses. I'm thinking, what? Okay, wait, I have an entire room full of PhDs that can help me with figuring out the laser glasses for my employees, and subject matter experts. They can talk about the electrical systems. I don't have to know this, but what my job is in my safety university is to identify them to be those trainers. Utilizing outside resources, again, your insurance broker, learn about your company's insurance program, talk to your carrier loss control consultant. Now remember, yes, they are there to look out for the best interest of the insurer. I get that. But you know what? Develop a good relationship. They are a great resource for you. Meet your broker loss control consultant. Your broker has your best interests in mind, and they are there. And most of this is something you're already paying for, both the carrier and the broker. That service is free. Attend Safety Center safety meetings. Yay, you're here. You're already doing that. Join the American Society of Safety Professionals. As Warren said so perfectly, surround yourself with other people like yourself. If you haven't ever gone to an annual meeting, to be surrounded by 6,000 to 7,000 other people who think and feel the way you do is amazing. Because you know what? Even our families have no clues to what we do, right? Most people, after all these years in safety, most people have no idea what it is that you do. Oh, you work for OSHA. No, I don't work for OSHA, right? Attend RIMS meeting, Risk Insurance Manager Society. Understand what insurance issues are out there. Join industry associations specific to your industry. Remember, OSHA holds us accountable not just for OSHA regulations, but the best practices of our industry. Offer to speak at meetings, ASSP, whether or not you belong to a chapter. Become a subject matter expert. Nobody knows your business better than you. Nobody does. First and foremost, as a safety leader, you are a visionary. You know where your safety program is and where you want it to go. Meet with other safety professionals similar to your organization, the municipalities and dealing with police and fire and public works and water. They're all so unique and they all have their own little niches and their own little WUSMA, the Water Utility Safety Managers Association. They all have their own little areas of expertise, and you can kind of tap into that. You are a role model. Oh, for goodness sakes, if you enter an area that says safety glasses must be worn, you better have your safety glasses on. I can't tell you how many times I had visited locations and I refused to go out because I had my safety glasses, but the safety manager didn't have theirs, or whatever it was. Open-toed shoes. What are you doing? You have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. You are a manager. Being a manager is not a bad word, right? Oh, you have to be a leader. Well, you have to manage things too. You have to make sure that you're meeting goals and expectations. We have rules and regulations we have to meet. You are a mentor, right? You are a mentor, and you have to let other people know that they are mentors as well. We talked about people that are seasoned on the call, and I always use the example of Krusty Bob. Krusty Bob is that employee that we all have. Name him whatever you want. I always use the name Krusty Bob, who says, look, I've been doing this for 40 years and I've never worn safety glasses, and nothing's ever happened. And I would say to Krusty Bob, would you say that you're lucky that you never got your eye poked out in 40 years not wearing safety glasses? Well, yeah, probably. Had some close calls. Well, you know what? John over here is a brand new employee. He just got married. He's just going to have his first baby, and he's watching you. You are his mentor. And what if he doesn't wear his safety glasses and he's not as lucky as you? Turn Krusty Bobs of your organization into a mentor, not just you. At the end of the day, you are a protector. You are sometimes the one person, and that's why I asked the question, have you ever had to stop your operation because you didn't have the safety controls in place? They are relying at you at the end of the day to be their protector. They trust you because you have integrity with them, and they know that you have their best interest in mind. Ooh, there we go. So my closing thoughts: implement the 4. Have your employees write down, or ask each manager to have their employees at their next meeting write down the 4 people that would be affected if they got hurt on the job. Get posters. Watch out for your 4. Think of your 4. Learn 3 things about each employee. I know it's easier said than done, especially those of you that have hundreds of employees, municipalities out there, but get to know at least their names. Coach, mentor, listen, be a valued contributor beyond safety. Talk business, talk goals and mission. And this is the thing I just want to mention. Never, ever, ever be motivated by internal politics, ever. If a safety professional is ever perceived that you're only making decisions because you want to be promoted, or you're playing politics, you're going to lose their trust. We are the least political person in an entire organization. Don't lose sight of the fact that employee safety always comes first, because we as safety professionals have a right to a seat at the table. And I hope that was helpful. Lauren, that is what I have for everyone today. I'm sorry about the initial glitch, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
That's great. Well, we'll open it up to a couple of questions. Before we get to some questions, if there are any, feel free to write them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask them. That's always a great way to ask your questions. We do have next month's safety forum coming up. February, or actually, I don't think I updated the slide, so I'm not going to share it. But next month, second Tuesday, it's going to be on ergonomics, so that should be valuable for hybrid work. We also have our, just a reminder, mark your calendar, second Tuesday in February, our symposium is coming up. It's going to get here faster than we know. It's almost fall already. We're getting out of summer, and looking forward to that. But as we wrap up, there will also be a 1-minute survey for everybody to take as you close your screens. Not yet, because we want to ask some questions, but please do take a minute for that survey. It just helps us improve the safety forums. So Kathy, thank you. That was hugely beneficial, hugely valuable content. I'm still learning, and it's amazing. But I saw a comment by Jasmine. She said she was having the same issues with deputies not wanting to be fit tested because they've been in the department 15 plus years and they've never had to. No one's ever required it. So I know others are having similar experiences. Can you please provide those dates again? Oh, for the Ergo. Yes, it's the second Tuesday. Actually, I'll look that up really quickly, but any questions for Kathy? Great information, so valuable. Thank you, Kathy. I see as the comments. Any questions? Feel free to unmute if anyone has any questions as well as we dive in a little bit. We'll take a couple minutes for questions.
You know, if while people are thinking, you know, the question about, you know, the sheriff's not, I've never been fit tested, you know, whether it's that, or I've heard that in organizations before. You know what, we know more now. We didn't know what we knew then 15 years ago. And that's different. We're always learning more about industrial hygiene and what you are exposed to. And so, no, maybe 15 years ago, we didn't make it a priority, but we know now what you are exposed to. So humor me and let's do fit testing, right? You only have to do it once unless something drastically changes. So it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, it's a great response. Any other questions? See a lot of thank yous. Another thank you. There we go. I just wanted to confirm.
That was awesome. Thank you so much.
Right. That will receive the meeting invitation for the ergonomics. Yes, we will be sending that out very shortly. We'll make sure everybody is invited on here in our mailing list to the ergonomics and hybrid for hybrid work next month. Galen just put in the chat for the date, September 12th. Did I say that right? Yeah, so that's going to be a great time as well. Yeah, Kathy, thank you. Galen, you were saying, or just a thank you? You were just saying.
I was just thanking Kathy. That was excellent. That
was very
great
good
information.
My pleasure.
And then with your permission, we'll send a follow-up, just thanking everyone for attending. And Kathy, if you'd like, we'll connect after, but we can, I believe you gave us the presentation to share for those who participated. So if you want to see those links for some of those resources, you'll have access to those as well. And we'll give you the rest of the information.
I'll send you an updated presentation because, of course, I made some changes at the very last minute for clarification this morning, like up until the moment I logged on. So I will send you. I found one typo, so I fixed that, but I also clarified some things. So I'll send you the most recent that you can send them, which is what I just used.
Perfect. And I love Julie just said, so happy to see and hear saving lives was at the top of your list.
Hey, Warren.
Yes,
Warren,
Jackie.
Yeah, hey, Kathy, great presentation. We're cut from the same cloth. I mean, we have the same, very similar background. I'm still a risk manager, not retired yet. But hey, what you do, and I just wanted to point out to everybody else, if you're trying to get your people on board, I tell a lot of stories. I've got over 500 clients. I do the mishap investigations. I work with Cal OSHA. And nothing scares a client more to pay attention is when they have a mishap, an injury now that's going to involve Cal OSHA. All of a sudden, they see God. you know, and you got to use that time. I hate to say it, sometimes you don't want to throw that in front of your boss saying, hey, but I understand that another industry that's still similar to ours have this type of issue. Now, the Bumblebee one, I've been teaching that one for years, because there was two sides of the stories of why did the employee go inside the barrel in the first place. You know, you got to teach your folks that they don't need to be taking a risk that's going to take their lives. But when you talk about enforcement, when you talk about being fined and cited, those citations, $6 million citation that they received is not tax deductible. So you
Or
have to
covered
go-
by insurance.
Exactly. You have to actually talk business. Safety is an investment. Simple as that. If your employee does something stupid and dies or is maimed and Cal OSHA comes to town, they go after the employer. They don't go after the stupid employee. Okay. So it's trying to, how do you mentor? How do you keep your people safe? It starts with the employee and mentoring them that there's nothing at that job worth their life. Okay, so you're prior military, I'm prior military. We were taught to give our life for our country, but doggone it, you know, don't go
Not at
dying
work.
for doing something stupid. So, I mean, you're great presentation. I mean,
Thank
you
you,
speak
Jackie.
everything that I speak, and it's so great to hear other people that have similar like-minded ways to getting across the message, which sometimes you can't hold their hands. Sometimes you got to be direct.
Mhm.
If a life counts on, I just finished another, not, well, at least this wasn't a fatality, but this guy lost 3 fingers with a table saw. And I got to meet the new Cal OSHA folks out of San Bernardino. And, you know, it's what changes, you know, human nature still needs to be mentored. You know, why did somebody with 30 years of experience stick his fingers holding the push stick, which it hit the blade and kicked back, and he lost 3 fingers over it. He's been doing this job for 30 years. Why did that happen? So complacency, distraction, the same stuff. So, but now the client's got to deal with Cal OSHA because their employee did something that they shouldn't have done.
Yeah, it's
But
about
anyway,
taking
great.
luck out of that equation.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
yeah,
takes
remember,
boldness, I
luck is
think,
not-
from-
Luck is
yeah.
not an IIPP. So, but great job.
Wonderful.
Great job.
Thank you,
Kathy.
Jackie. Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
And how's
All right,
retirement?
well, semi-retirement. Here she is. I'm kidding.
Yeah, are you saying are you the risk manager for your church? Because I became the risk manager of my church too.
And no, I just came off 2 years of presidency, but 22 years of security chair. So,
Oh.
you know, that's what happens.
All right. Any other questions? I'll give one more second if there are any other questions. Doesn't look like it. So we will send out a follow-up. Thank you everyone for joining. Kathy, thank you again.
My honor.
Yeah,
Thank
it
you,
was an absolute
everybody.
pleasure. All right, great job.
Thank you.
All right.
All
We'll see you
right.
all next month.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Great seeing you. Take care.
You too, Aileen. Bye.